Hello everyone. You can't imagine a JavaScript interview without a question like what is this keyword and how the value of this keyword changes in different scenarios. In this session, I am going to answer all the questions that you may face in the interview about this keyword. Let's start. We all know that value of this keyword is window object in the global scope. If you print the value of this in the global scope, we are going to get the value window object, right? Now let us see the first scenario. Let's create a variable called age with value 28 and define a function called display age and print the value age and this keyword inside the display age function. Let's invoke the display age function. Let's guess the output. If we save it, we are going to get the value of age 28 and value of this keyword window object. So what is this keyword? This refers to the object that is currently calling the function. Just quickly recall one thing. The variables and functions that are declared inside the global scope will be added to the window object, right? Now if we just expand the window object, we can see the age and also display age function as part of window object. So whenever JavaScript calls the display age function, internally it calls display age function like this, window.displayAge. If you save it, we get the same output like 28 and window object. So since this equal to the window object, we can call age like this dot age. If we save it, we get the same output 28 and window object. And as I said, this refers to the object that is currently calling the function. Here window is the object that is calling the display age function. So this refers to the window object here. So this refers to the window object. In simple words, whatever we have before this dot notation, that refers to this keyword. Now let us see the second scenario. I am going to create a object called person, and inside the person I am going to have property age with value 26 this time, and it's going to have the function called display age, and I am going to assign the display age function that we declared inside the global scope. So take this and assign here. And now let's invoke the display age function of person and see the result, person dot display age. And whenever we invoke this person display age function, we know that this display age function is going to be called and it is going to print age and this keyword. Now just save it. Now we can see that value of age is 26. It is not 28 this time. And here we can see that most important thing, that is value of this is object, nothing but a person object. So whenever you have the data in curly braces, that represents the object, right? So here this is nothing but a person object, age and display age. So as I said, this refers to the object that is currently calling the function. Here person is the object that is calling the display age function. So this refers to the person object. And also we have one more understanding, that whatever object is there before this dot, that refers to this keyword. So here person refers to this keyword. So far so good. Now let us see the another scenario. This time I am going to add nested object for person object. So let's add a object inside the person object. I say nested person, and again we are going to have age and display age function. So here this time let us define, instead of 26 let us define 40, and again it is going to have the same display age function that we declared in the global scope, right? Same function we assigned here. Now let us invoke the display age function of nested person. So to access the nested person, we need to use the person object, right? Because nested object is part of person object. So person dot nested person dot, then we are going to call display age function. Can you guess the value of age and this keyword? Give a try. So just save it. There you go. Now this time we got the value of age is 40 and value of this keyword is nested person object. So it is not person object, nested person object. So one more time we just recall our definition, like this refers to the object that is currently calling the function. Here nested person is calling the display age function, not the person object. That's the reason this refers to the nested person object in this case. So far so good. You might have noticed one thing. We have defined display age function only one time, but we have reused it twice. We have used display age function inside the person object as well as inside the nested person object. Since the value of this keyword depends on how we call the function, we were able to reuse the display age function. Before we seeing the next scenario, let's discuss about two things. In JavaScript, the scope of the function depends on where function is defined. But this keyword works exactly opposite to that. The value of this keyword is determined by how a function is called, not where function is defined. Here, when we call the display age function in the global scope, this refers to the window object. And whenever we call the display age function on person object, this refers to the person object. And whenever we call it on nested person, this refers to the nested person object. So the value of this changes dynamically and it highly depends on runtime binding. And having these two things discussed, let's see how this works in arrow functions. So I'm going to remove this entire code. Here we have person object defined with property age and greet1 function. Inside the greet1 function, we are printing the value of this dot age and this keyword. And we have greet2 function defined inside the greet1 function. And once again in the greet2 function, we are printing the value of this dot age and this keyword. And finally, we are making call to greet2 function inside the greet1 function. So whenever we make a call to greet1 function, greet2 function will be executed automatically. So now let's make a call to greet1 function. So person dot greet1 function, and as soon as we save it, we can easily guess the output of this dot age and this keyword of greet1 function, because here we are calling the greet1 function on person object. So this of greet1 function refers to the person object. But what about the value of this inside the greet2 function? Let's see it. Save it. There you go. Now as expected, we can see that this dot age of greet1 function is 28, right? And also this of greet1 function refers to the person object. This is expected. And interestingly, we can see that this in the greet2 function refers to the window object, right? It is not referring to the person object. It is referring to the window object, and obviously this dot age will be undefined because window object is not having the age property defined. So now what is happening here? As we discussed earlier, the value of this will be determined by how a function is called, not where function is defined. So here, even though we have greet2 function defined inside the person object, it doesn't matter. Here how we are calling the greet2 function is matters. So here we are calling the greet2 function without passing any object or without any implicity or explicitly binding. So the value of this inside the greet2 function refers to the window object. So now let's change this greet2 function from normal function to arrow function and see the magic. So let's define greet2 as arrow function. So constant greet2 equal to arrow function, and inside the arrow function let us print the value of age and this keyword, and this should be greet2. Now let's save it and see the magic. Save it. There you go. Now we can see that this dot age of greet2 refers to the person object only, right? You can see the 28, and this of greet2 refers to the person object. Here you can see the person object, right? Basically arrow functions doesn't contain this keyword. So in case of arrow functions, the value of this keyword will be determined where the arrow function is defined. So here we have defined arrow function inside the person object, right? So that's the reason it always points to the person object. To prove that this value in arrow functions will be determined where function is defined, let's take this greet2 function and define in global scope. So now just define here greet2, and here I say greet2 global, and now So we don't have this dot age defined in global scope, right? So let's define that value. So I'm going to define where age equal to, this time I say 40. Okay, and now let's save it. There you go, we have this grid2 function defined in global scope, right? And we are calling that from the global scope, and here you can see that value of this is referred to the window object. So grid2 global window object, and also we can see that this dot age is refers to the value 40 because we have defined that age 40 in global scope, right? So this way we can say that arrow functions are not having their own this keyword, right? So this is the difference between how this works in normal function and arrow function. Guys, this is very important interview question. I am sure you will be asked. In the next episode, we are going to see what is explicit binding and how this works with respect to call, apply and bind functions. Thank you for watching.